Wyoming Territory, 1874. The wind whistled through the small town of Silver Creek, carrying dust that settled on the white lace of Zoe Valentine's wedding dress as she stood alone at the altar. The church was painfully quiet now, empty except for the sympathetic glances of the preacher and her maid of honor. Jebediah Mason, the man who had promised to make her his wife, was nowhere to be found. 3 hours of waiting had confirmed what everyone else seemed to know. She had been abandoned on her wedding day. "He ain't coming back, child," Preacher Williams finally said, closing his Bible with a soft thump that echoed through the empty church. "Perhaps it's the Lord's way of sparing you from a man without conviction." At 20 years old, with golden blonde hair cascading down her back and blue eyes now clouded with tears, Zoe had believed that love could flourish even in this harsh territory. The daughter of a shopkeeper who had died last winter, she had few options in this unforgiving land. Jebediah had seemed her salvation, until today. "A woman alone has no place out here," her mother had always warned. Now, standing in her handmade wedding dress that had taken months to prepare, Zoe feared her mother had been right. The frontier was no place for dreams, only survival. Outside the church, Luke Donnelly removed his hat, running a hand through his sandy brown hair as he watched the last of the wedding guests disperse. At 25, he had learned that attachments led to heartbreak on the frontier. He had seen it time and again, families torn apart by disease, drought, or violence. Better to keep to himself, tend his small ranch outside town, and avoid entanglements. His own parents had loved fiercely, only for his mother to die in childbirth and his father to follow her to the grave from a broken heart 3 years later. Since then, Luke had lived by one rule. The only way to survive the frontier was to need no one. He had built his life around this belief, working as a ranch hand until saving enough to stake his own small claim. "Seems that city fellow didn't have the spine for frontier life after all," muttered Sheriff Tompkins beside him. "Heard he caught the eastbound stage this morning. Left a letter saying he couldn't handle the isolation out here." Luke's jaw tightened. "A man's words should mean something," he said, watching as Zoe appeared in the church doorway, her wedding dress gleaming in the harsh sunlight, her face a mask of dignity despite her obvious pain. Something twisted in his chest at the sight. "She's got nowhere to go now," the sheriff continued. "Her pa's store's been sold to cover his debts. Reckon she'll have to take up at Widow Parker's boarding house, if she can find work to pay for it." The thought of that proud young woman reduced to charity cases stirred something unfamiliar in Luke. Before he knew what he was doing, he was walking toward the church, his boots kicking up dust in the dry Wyoming air. 2 days later, Zoe stood behind the counter at Hartman's General Store, fighting to maintain her composure as Mrs. Whitley examined the fabric she'd requested, making no effort to lower her voice. "Well, I suppose it's better than ending up with a husband who'd leave you for certain later. Still, the shame of it all, standing there in front of the whole town." Zoe kept her eyes fixed on the ledger, pretending to count inventory. Mr. Hartman had given her the job out of pity, everyone knew it, but it paid enough to secure a tiny room at the boarding house. The wedding gifts had all been returned, the dress packed away, and her dreams of a home and family folded neatly alongside it. The bell above the door jangled, and Luke Donnelly stepped inside, removing his hat. Unlike the other men who had come to gawk at the abandoned bride, his eyes held no curiosity or judgment, only a quiet intensity that made her straighten her spine. "Miss Valentine," he nodded, approaching the counter. "I need supplies. Flour, coffee, ammunition for my Winchester, and—" He paused, eyes darting to Mrs. Whitley, who had fallen conspicuously silent. "And I find myself in need of assistance with a problem at my ranch." Zoe blinked. "Mr. Donnelly, I'm afraid Mr. Hartman handles the ammunition sales." "Not that kind of assistance," he interrupted, his voice low. "My sister's arriving from Denver next week. Been ill. Doctor recommended country air. I need someone to help ready the place. It's not fit for a lady at present." Mrs. Whitley's eyebrows shot up so high they nearly disappeared beneath her bonnet. "I'll pay fair wages," Luke continued, "for however long it takes. You can ride out with me today to see the place. Return to town by sundown if you're not interested." Zoe studied him carefully. Luke Donnelly was known as a loner, a man who kept to himself, but whose word was considered unbreakable in Silver Creek. She'd never heard mention of a sister. "Mr. Hartman, she called to the back room. Would it be possible for me to leave early today? Mr. Donnelly has offered me additional work. Mr. Hartman appeared, wiping his hands on his apron. The Donnelly place is respectable enough, he said after Luke explained. Though I've never known you to hire help before, Luke. Something flickered across Luke's face, so briefly Zoe almost missed it. Never had reason to make the place more than functional before, he replied. Sister needs more comforts than I'm equipped to provide. An hour later, Zoe found herself riding beside Luke in his wagon, heading toward the foothills beyond town. She had changed from her store dress into a simple blue calico, the only one of her few remaining dresses suitable for housework. There is no sister coming from Denver, is there, Mr. Donnelly? She asked as the town disappeared behind them. His hands tightened on the reins. No, he admitted after a moment. But the work is real, and so is the pay. Why the deception then? Because offering charity would have insulted you, and offering work without explanation would have damaged your reputation, he said simply. People in town talk enough as it is. And what do they say about you, Mr. Donnelly? She asked, surprising herself with her boldness. A faint smile touched his lips. That I keep to myself. That I don't need anyone. And is that true? He didn't answer for a long while, guiding the horses up a gentle slope. Finally, as his ranch came into view, a modest cabin with a small barn and corral beside it, he spoke again. I found it safer that way. The frontier takes more than it gives, Miss Valentine. I learned that young. The rawness in his voice resonated with something inside her. Yet here you are, offering work to a woman you barely know. Here I am, he agreed, pulling the wagon to a stop. My reasons are my own, but the work and pay are honest. The work at Luke's ranch proved more substantial than Zoe had anticipated. The cabin, while structurally sound, had clearly been inhabited by a man with no interest in comforts. The first day, she scrubbed floors and washed windows. The second, she tackled the kitchen. By the end of the first week, she had transformed the spare, utilitarian cabin into something resembling a home. Luke kept his distance, spending days tending his small herd of cattle or mending fences. He'd return at dusk to find dinner waiting. Simple fare made from the supplies he'd provided, and each evening, he'd drive her back to town before returning to his ranch alone. On the seventh day, a spring storm descended without warning. The sky darkened to an ominous green as Luke burst through the door, raindrops already staining his shirt. We need to get you back to town, he said, grabbing his coat, before the creek rises. But they had barely loaded the wagon when lightning split the sky, sending the horses skittering in terror. One broke free, bolting toward the open range. Damnation, Luke muttered. We'll never make it now. The storm's moving too fast. Thunder rolled across the land as the rain began to fall in earnest. You'll have to stay the night, he said, helping her down from the wagon. I'll take the barn. Inside, as the storm raged, Zoe built up the fire and prepared a simple meal from the provisions at hand. Luke remained standing awkwardly by the door, as if uncertain of his place in his own home. Sit, Mr. Donnelly, she said. I promise not to compromise your reputation. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. It's your reputation I'm concerned with, Miss Valentine. I think my reputation survived the worst damage it could suffer the day I was left at the altar, she said quietly, placing a plate before him. At this point, spending a stormy night in the home of a man known for his integrity seems a minor concern. As the evening deepened, they found themselves talking, truly talking, for the first time. Luke spoke of his parents, of losing them young, of building his ranch from nothing. Zoe shared stories of her father's shop, of helping him order inventory, of her mother's early death from consumption. And Mason? Luke finally asked. How did he convince you to marry him? Zoe stared into the fire. He represented escape, she admitted. After father died, the debts surfaced. The store would have to be sold. Jebediah offered security, a future. I convinced myself that was enough. Was it? Luke's voice was soft. She met his eyes across the table. I don't know. I never got to find out. For what it's worth, he said carefully. Any man who'd leave you waiting deserves to spend his life regretting it. Something warm unfurled in Zoe's chest at his words. The storm lasted through the night, finally breaking at dawn. As promised, Luke had slept in the barn, returning to the cabin with fresh eggs and milk for breakfast. I'll take you to town after we eat, he said, carefully averting his eyes from the sight of her with her hair loose around her shoulders. "People will talk, but let them," she interrupted. "They'll talk regardless. And I've work to finish here, if you still want me to continue." He looked at her then, really looked at her, as if seeing something he hadn't before. "I do," he said simply. The weeks that followed established a rhythm. Zoe would work at the general store 3 days a week, and at Luke's ranch the other 4. Sometimes he would drive her back to town in the evening. Increasingly, she would stay in the cabin while he took the barn. Always proper, always separate, yet growing less like strangers with each passing day. Spring bloomed across the Wyoming landscape, painting the hills with wildflowers. The cabin transformed under Zoe's care, curtains at the windows, a vegetable garden taking root behind the house, the smell of fresh bread often filling the air. "You've changed this place," Luke said one evening as they sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in fiery hues. "For the better, I hope," she replied. "Yes." He hesitated, then added, "But that's not what I meant. You've changed everything." Before she could ask what he meant, hoofbeats pounded up the road. A rider appeared, his horse lathered with sweat. "Donnelly," the man called. "Raiders hit the Peterson place. They're moving this way. Sheriff's gathering men." Luke was on his feet instantly. "How many?" 6, maybe 7. Armed and desperate. "They've already killed Peterson and his eldest boy." Luke turned to Zoe, his expression grim. "I have to go. Stay here. Bar the door. My shotgun is under the bed. Use it if you have to." Before she could protest, he was saddling his horse, checking his revolver, and riding off with the messenger. Alone in the cabin as darkness fell, Zoe found the shotgun and placed it near the door. Hours passed with no word, her mind filled with terrible images. Luke shot, bleeding, dying alone on the range. The thought chilled her to the bone, making her realize how much he had come to mean to her. It was well past midnight when she heard horses approaching. Peering through the window, she saw 3 riders, none of them Luke. Her heart pounding, she grabbed the shotgun, positioning herself beside the door. The knock, when it came, was hard and demanding. "Who's there?" she called, trying to keep her voice steady. "Open up, lady. We need water and food. Don't make this difficult." "The owner isn't here," she replied. "Please move on." A laugh. "We know he's gone. Him and the other men are chasing shadows 10 miles south. Now open up before we lose patience." Zoe's hands tightened on the shotgun. "I have a weapon, and I know how to use it." "Right on." A moment of silence, then the door shuddered under a powerful kick. It held, but she knew it wouldn't for long. Backing away, she aimed the shotgun at the entrance, steadying her breathing the way her father had taught her years ago. The next kick splintered the frame. The third sent the door crashing inward. 2 men stood there, revolvers drawn, while a third waited with the horses. "Well now," said the leader, a scarred man with cold eyes. "Ain't you a pretty one? Donnelly's got himself a woman, does he?" Zoe's finger tightened on the trigger. "Take what supplies you need from the barn and go." The second man laughed. "Seems like we found something better than supplies." He took a step forward, and Zoe fired. The blast caught him in the shoulder, sending him staggering backward with a howl of pain. Before she could reload, the leader was on her, wrenching the shotgun away and striking her across the face. She tasted blood, stars exploding across her vision. "You'll pay for that," he snarled, dragging her toward the door. "We'll take you with us. Maybe drop what's left of you where Donnelly can find it." As he hauled her outside, hoofbeats thundered from the darkness. A shot rang out, and the man holding the horses crumpled to the ground. The leader spun, using Zoe as a shield as he drew his revolver. "Donnelly," he shouted, "we've got your woman. Throw down your gun, or she dies right here." For a moment, only silence answered him. Then Luke's voice came from the darkness, calm and deadly. "She's not my woman. She's just hired help. But if you harm her, you're still a dead man." The word struck Zoe like physical blows. Just hired help. After all these weeks, was that truly all she was to him? "You're lying," the outlaw said. "No man keeps hired help looking like this one." "Test me and find out," Luke replied, his voice closer now. "Let her go, and maybe you ride away from this." The outlaw's arm tightened around Zoe's throat. "Show yourself first." "I'm right here." The voice came from directly behind them. Before the outlaw could turn, a gunshot cracked through the night air. The outlaw's grip went slack, and he slumped to the ground. Zoe staggered forward, gasping for breath, as Luke materialized from the shadows, his revolver still smoking. "Are you hurt?" he demanded, eyes scanning her face where a bruise was already forming. "No," she managed. "But you, how did you know?" "Peterson's boy got away, warned us it was a diversion." His hands found her shoulders, steadying her. "I came back as fast as I could." The wounded outlaw was moaning on the ground. Luke secured him with rope, then turned back to Zoe, his expression unreadable in the darkness. "Did you mean it?" she asked. "Am I truly just hired help to you?" He looked away. "I said what I had to. If he thought you mattered, he would have killed you for certain." "And do I?" she pressed. "Matter?" For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, "You should go back to town tomorrow. It's not safe here." The following morning, Luke hitched up the wagon in silence. The sheriff had come for the prisoners, one dead, two alive, in the early hours, leaving them alone with the wreckage of the night before. "Is this goodbye then?" Zoe asked as he helped her into the wagon. His face was shuttered, closed off in a way it hadn't been for weeks. "It's for the best. Last night proved that. Last night proved that danger finds us whether we're alone or together," she countered. "At least together, we stood a chance." "I can't risk," he began, then stopped himself. "The work is done. The cabin is, it's more than I ever expected it to be. You've earned every cent I promised you." As they drove toward town, the silence between them grew heavier with each mile. When the buildings of Silver Creek appeared on the horizon, Zoe finally broke it. "When my father died, I learned that relying on others is dangerous. When Jebediah left me at the altar, I decided that love was a luxury I couldn't afford. But these past weeks with you," she took a deep breath, "these past weeks have shown me I was wrong." Luke's hands tightened on the reins. "Zoe, let me finish. You believe the frontier takes more than it gives. That needing people only leads to pain when you inevitably lose them. I used to think the same. But now I see that's fear talking, not wisdom." He pulled the wagon to a stop at the edge of town. "It's not fear. It's experience." "Then why did you come back for me last night?" she challenged. "Why did you offer me work in the first place?" For the first time since she'd known him, Luke Donnelly looked utterly at a loss for words. "I have to go," he finally said. "Sheriff needs statements about the raiders. You should find yourself a better situation than what I can offer." With that, he helped her down, handed her the payment they'd agreed upon, and drove away without looking back. Days passed, stretching into a week. Zoe moved mechanically through her duties at the general store, fighting the hollow feeling in her chest. She had foolishly allowed herself to believe that something was building between them, something real and lasting. On the 8th day after their parting, the bell above the shop door jangled. Zoe looked up to see a well-dressed stranger enter, a man with an Eastern accent and expensive clothes. "I'm looking for Zoe Valentine," he announced. "I represent the firm of Blackwell and Sons, attorneys at law." Mr. Hartman directed the man to her. "Miss Valentine, I've been searching for you for some time," the lawyer said, producing a thick envelope. "Your uncle, Edmund Valentine, passed away 3 months ago in Boston. As his only living relative, you are his heir." Zoe stared at him in disbelief. "I have no uncle in Boston. He was your father's elder brother. They had a falling out before you were born. Nevertheless, you are now the owner of a considerable estate, including a shipping business valued at over $50,000. The sum was so vast it seemed unreal. Mr. Hartman gasped audibly from behind the counter. "There is one condition," the lawyer continued. "You must return east to claim your inheritance. A ticket on tomorrow's stage has been arranged." That evening, Zoe sat alone in her boarding house room, staring at the train ticket that would take her from Cheyenne all the way to Boston. $50,000 meant freedom, security, a life beyond anything she could achieve in Silver Creek. Yet all she could think of was a small ranch in the Wyoming foothills and the man who lived there alone. At dawn, she hired the livery stable's only buggy and drove herself out to Luke's ranch. The morning was crisp and clear, the mountains sharp against the blue sky. When she arrived, Luke was mending the corral fence, his back to the road. He turned at the sound of wheels, his expression shuddering when he saw her. "Zoe, what are you doing here?" She climbed down from the buggy, clutching the lawyer's envelope. "I came to say goodbye. I'm leaving on today's stage." Something flickered across his face. "Leaving? Where to?" "Boston. It seems I have an uncle, had an uncle, who left me his estate." Quite a substantial one. Luke set down his tools, wiping his hands on his trousers. That's good news. Congratulations. Thank you, she said. I wanted you to know that these past months, working here, they meant something to me. Whatever they meant to you. He looked away, jaw tight. They meant something. Not enough, though. Zoe, it's all right, she interrupted. I understand. The frontier takes more than it gives, as you said. I came to thank you for the work, and for coming back that night. She turned to go, but his voice stopped her. Why are you really here, Zoe? She faced him again, heart pounding. To see if there was any reason I should stay. The silence stretched between them, taut as a wire. Finally, he spoke, his voice rough. I told myself hiring you was just charity. Then I told myself keeping you on was just because the work was good. Then I told myself letting you stay nights during storms was just being decent. He took a step toward her. I've been lying to myself since the day I saw you standing alone in that wedding dress. Why? She whispered. Because I was afraid. Afraid that if I admitted how much you'd come to mean to me, I'd lose you too. Like I've lost everyone else I've ever cared about. So you pushed me away instead. He nodded, anguish written across his features. And now you're leaving anyway. $50,000 and a life in Boston. It's more than Wyoming could ever offer you. Is it? She moved closer. What if what I want isn't in Boston at all? Hope and doubt warred in his eyes. What are you saying? I'm saying that money can't buy belonging. It can't buy the feeling I have when I'm here, working alongside you. It can't replace. She took a deep breath. It can't replace love. Love, he repeated, as if tasting the word for the first time. Yes, Luke. Love. The kind that makes a person drive miles at dawn to give a stubborn rancher one last chance to ask her to stay. Suddenly, he was moving, closing the distance between them in 3 long strides. His hands framed her face with a gentleness that belied their strength. Stay, he whispered. Stay with me, Zoe Valentine. I've been a fool and a coward, but if you'll give me the chance, I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you. Is that a proposal, Mr. Donnelly? She asked, tears blurring her vision. It's a promise, he said. A promise that I'll never leave you behind. Not for a single day of our lives. And then he was kissing her, there in the golden morning light with the mountains standing witness. When they finally parted, breathless, he rested his forehead against hers. What about your inheritance? He asked. We'll write to the lawyer, she said. There must be a way to claim it without returning east. And if not, she shrugged. Then we'll build our fortune here, together. 2 months later, on a perfect summer day, Zoe Valentine stood once more before Preacher Williams. This time, however, there was no fear in her heart, no doubt that her groom would appear. And when Luke Donnelly walked into the church, his eyes never left hers for a moment. The townspeople of Silver Creek filled the pews, whispering about the abandoned bride who had found true love after all, about the lone rancher who had finally opened his heart, about the young couple who had already weathered outlaws and storms together. As they spoke their vows, Luke's voice carried clearly through the church. I promise to stand beside you through every trial this frontier brings. To build a home and a life with you that can withstand any hardship. To never leave you behind, not for a single day of our lives. Tears glistened in Zoe's eyes as she responded with her own vows, promising to face the uncertainties of the Wyoming Territory together. Later, as they drove back to their ranch, for it was truly theirs now, Luke pulled the wagon to a stop at the crest of a hill overlooking their land. The cabin below had a new addition under construction, paid for by the first installment of Zoe's inheritance, which the lawyer had indeed arranged for her to claim without returning east. What do you see? Luke asked, his arm around her waist. Zoe leaned against him, taking in the view, the cabin with smoke curling from its chimney, the cattle grazing in the distance, the garden she had planted now lush with vegetables, the foundations of what would become a larger home for the family they hoped to build. I see everything I never knew I wanted, she answered. I see home. I spent years believing the frontier only took, Luke said softly, never imagining it could give me the greatest gift of all. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, they drove down to the ranch that had once been a lonely man's refuge and was now the foundation of their shared future. A future built not on fear of loss, but on the certainty that whatever the frontier might throw at them, they would face it together. For in the vast, unforgiving expanse of the Wyoming Territory, they had found something rare and precious, a love strong enough to tame the wilderness, and hearts brave enough to believe in second chances.